Plot twist of the week. Even Paul Finebaum is now backing Miami in the great Notre Dame debate.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available on all your podcast platforms, available on YouTube, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. On this loaded episode, we'll give you our Week 13 hate guide. All the teams that Miami fans need to root against if you want to have a chance to sneak into that college football playoff and maybe even into the ACC championship game. We'll talk matchups and keys against Virginia Tech, a team the Hurricanes absolutely should beat easily. It's going to be a matter of what version of Miami shows up, quite honestly, but how about this in the great Miami Notre Dame college football playoff rankings debate? You will certainly find folks out there, most of them with affiliations to that school in South Bend, vehemently defending Notre Dame's position 4 spots above Miami in the CFP. But most of the people out there who don't have ties to that program, even folks who have been Miami haters over the years, like Paul Finebaum, are now coming out in favor of logic, in favor of fairness. Because again, folks, in sports, when two teams have the same win-loss record, which is currently the case between Miami and Notre Dame, if they played head-to-head in any other situation, apparently outside of college football, is used as the primary tiebreaker. And in this case, they don't play all of the same opponents, although they do have multiple common opponents, including Miami actually beat NC State more convincingly than Notre Dame did, for what it's worth. But in this case, the two teams have similar strengths of schedules and similar strengths of record. So the idea that you wouldn't use the head-to-head result, which went to Miami, as the primary tiebreaker, it's illogical. Basically outside of college football. College football is the one sport where somehow this becomes somewhat normal, but I'm glad it's not somewhat expected, all right? Because in this case, the CFP committee, they have chosen to value Notre Dame over Miami primarily because of the quality of Notre Dame's losses is better than Miami's, without any mention that one of those losses is to Miami, by the way. And Miami's win over Notre Dame, just so you know, is better than Notre Dame's best win this season against USC. But their losses are great. Here's what Paul Finebaum said. Now, Paul Finebaum, is he usually in Miami's corner? When Miami loses, Finebaum is usually the first to come out of the woodwork and talk about how overrated and how terrible Miami is. You know, years ago, I think it was during the Manny Diaz era, Finebaum once referred to Miami as a third world program among college football. So this is not usually someone you have in your corner, okay? But Finebaum appeared on ESPN's Get Up and commented on, Notre Dame being ranked 4 spots ahead of Miami. And listen, Paul is probably also upset that Notre Dame is ranked in front of the Alabama Crimson Tide. So he's probably angry on this for multiple reasons, but he said, quote, "There is a bias. Let's go ahead and admit it," he said. "And this committee, I have no earthly idea why they can't move beyond it because they're supposed to be objective. I feel bad for Miami," he said. Continues, quote, "They beat Notre Dame. Shouldn't head-to-head matter in college football or in any sporting event? But apparently to this committee, it doesn't matter at all." And Paul, there are other big-time college football voices that are standing up for logic here. Josh Pate, now with On3 Sports, been very vocal. Andy and Ari from On3, national college football columnist Dan Woken and these are not people who have any specific ties or biases or allegiances to Miami. These are just people who want to see the system be fair, and they want to see the system be logical. So, depending on how this plays out, there's going to be a lot of big questions that could be answered once these college football playoff rankings, once the final editions come in. Now, I say this, with a neon Miami light behind me, wearing Miami gear. I have full understanding that if Miami doesn't take care of their business these next 2 weeks, if you lose to either Virginia Tech on the road, where you're a big favorite, and Pitt on the road, where you probably will be favored, even though that's a tougher game, if Miami loses either of these games, any of these arguments obviously fall apart, and you will not hear a peep out of me. And you should not hear a peep out of any Miami fan or Miami backer, because, if the Hurricanes don't win out, then there is no argument for the college football playoff. But if Miami keeps winning, the arguments will be there, and the arguments are going to be loud. Miami starting quarterback Carson Beck spoke this week. Now, it's really not Beck's objective to be talking about playoff rankings and standings, because that's not what he's thinking about. Like, he is thinking about playing his best this Saturday, going 1-0 this week against Virginia Tech. But, of course, you sit in front of the media, you're going to get questions about it. I thought Beck handled it very well. So Carson Beck first was asked, and of course he, played at Georgia for some excellent teams there the past several years. He's now at Miami, and he was asked if Miami has the talent level to be a college football playoff team. Beck said, "I think we're super talented. We have all the talent in the world. For us, I keep preaching this. It's about focusing on each and every day and go 1-0. Keep it simple. Just shrinking the margins. Focus on what we need to do every day. With every opportunity we are given, we need to execute. That's where my mind is at," he said. "We're very talented on both sides of the ball and in all three facets." All right, so here he was asked if the team needs to look really good for these final two games in order to impress the college football playoff committee, to which Beck responded, "We just need to win every single play we run. Focus on that," he said. "It's that simple. The more you let the noise in, it's all rat poison," he said. Now, he learned that from Mario, who learned that from Saban. "We're climbing right now. We have to continue to get better, execute each play, and the result will speak for themselves." So that's, again, one of the challenges for Miami. And I think Beck tries to kind of insulate himself from this stuff, because you remember when he spoke a week ago, and this seemed legitimate. Like, I don't think he was being facetious or anything. Like, last week, Carson Beck didn't even know what Miami's playoff ranking was. Like, he didn't know that they were number 15 at that time. I'm not sure if he knew that they're 13 this week, but, he and his teammates need to continue to preach this message of, at this point, we can't go back in time and play the SMU game again. We can't go back in time and play the Louisville game again. All that we can do is focus on winning the next game on your schedule and winning every play in order to win that game. So you've got to keep that attitude right. And, listen, and folks, one of the reasons why the argument in favor of Miami has gained more weight in the past couple of weeks is the team seems to be playing their best football right now. And you hope that they can sustain that over these final two games, because, again, part of the reason why the Hurricane stock was really low coming out of that SMU game was because at that time you had dropped 2 out of 3 and you were playing your worst football late October, early November. But Miami they found a little bit of mojo these last couple of weeks, and I think a lot of it has been, maybe just the realization from Shannon Dawson. Even if he says we're running the same plays, there seems to have been more rhythm and variety in the play calling, but personnel has been a big part of that. The emergence of Girard Pringle has been a big key. The emergence of Keelan Marion at receiver. I know he'd been starting all year, but Marion the past 3 weeks has really been popping off and leading Miami in receiving. The continued improvement and maturity of Malachi Toney, who's taking on more responsibilities. And Malachi Toney is just a remarkable athlete and a remarkable person. Shannon Dawson, the OC, talked about Toney this week and just said, this guy, it's never too much for him. Like, taking on these extra responsibilities of throwing the football and running the wildcat and running the ball more and lining up everywhere, that he's just such a student of the game and he's such a hard worker that like none of this has been too much for him. And that, one of the big reasons why the trick plays work with Malachi Toney is he's always on the field. So it's not as if, oh, hey, Malachi's in the game, it must be a gadget play because he doesn't usually play. No, the guy's on the field for almost every offensive down. So you don't know when and where the gadget plays are going to come from, okay? So these have been things. And, you don't have to talk about the defense as much because Miami's defense has been consistently good all year long. Like, that hasn't changed. But the offense has had big-time peaks and valleys, and they seem to be now peaking and hopefully peaking at the right time because if you can continue to score, have fun, create big plays at the level they've been doing it for these last couple of weeks, you're going to show some style points to that college football playoff committee. We're going to talk about the matchups with Virginia Tech when we come back. We're also going to be answering questions from you guys, the Locked On Canes insiders. Click the link in the show description below if you want to try it free for 14 days. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. We're only getting started with FanDuel. And in case you were wondering, on the FanDuel app, Miami is favored by 17.5 points against Virginia Tech. The NBA is also back, folks, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure to check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I will have a new episode coming up later today. We take you around the conference, and, Georgia Tech has an opportunity this weekend to clinch a spot in the ACC championship game, but we'll tell you later why Miami will be rooting for Pittsburgh to beat them this week. Locked On ACC is available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So you look at Virginia Tech. This is a bad football team, the Hokies. It's why they fired their former head coach, Brent Pry, just 3 games and 3 losses into the season. Now, I think Virginia Tech has hit a home run with their next hire. James Franklin is their new head coach, but James Franklin will not be coaching on Saturday, just so we're clear on that. Now, he will apparently be at the game as a spectator, and, maybe he'll get a little extra juice from the Hokies roster because they're auditioning to be in front of their next head coach coming up, but there are no excuses for Miami not to win this game comfortably. Virginia Tech, in their 3-win to this point season, their only wins have come against Wofford, an upset against NC State in a close game. That was a 2-point victory, and a home 8-point win against Cal. Virginia Tech just got blown out by 20 against Florida State, right? The same Florida State that's been spiraling in recent weeks, but they were able to blow out Virginia Tech by 20. Some of the important rankings. Miami should be able to exploit this defense in a number of ways. Virginia Tech ranks 74th nationally in total defense, which is, below average, not awful, but below average. They surrender about 374 yards per game. Their rushing defense, not very good, ranks 85th. They give up 156 yards on the ground. Now, this is a game where I think Miami can have a lot of success rushing the football. Of course, past couple of weeks, Girard Pringle has been a revelation. I expect Pringle to start at running back for the second straight game. Why wouldn't you start him after the way he played last week? And Mark Fletcher. Fletcher is expected back this week. So I still think Pringle is going to start, even if Fletch is back. But Fletch is going to be there for that power, for that change of pace. You still have Marty Brown for the short yardage. So going up against the 85th ranked rushing defense in the country, I think Miami is going to have plenty of success on the ground. Virginia Tech against the pass is slightly below average at 68th nationally. They allow 218 yards per game. Now, the good news for the Hurricanes is the passing attack, which has been inconsistent at times this year, has been clicking on all cylinders the last couple of games, right? And C.J. Daniels will likely be back this week. You have Malachi Toney, who is a matchup nightmare. Toney is a player that's going to keep opposing defensive coordinators up at night to try to figure out what to do against that young man. Because even if you do bracket him and try to take him out, well, guess what? You've got other talented receivers like Keelan Marion, like C.J. Daniels back this week, like Josh Moore. Dalen Upshaw's gotten some work. Nye Carr had some good reps late in that game last week. I'd like to see more of him. Miami has other options if you give extra attention to Malachi Toney. And even if you do that, Malachi Toney can also line up in other spots and find other ways to beat you. So I'm pretty bullish on Miami's passing game recently. As far as the Hokies offense goes, Virginia Tech, they have not thrown the football effectively this year. In fact, I think one of their top two leading receivers has already, left the team with the coaching situation and everything. They are 115th in passing offense with just 171.7 yards passing per game. Virginia Tech's rushing offense is much better, 34th nationally, but I view their offense in being way too one-dimensional. I mean, Miami's got one of the best defenses in the country, period, including the third-rated rushing defense in America. And I think Virginia Tech is going to be too one-dimensional and too predictable to have rushing success against Miami. Miami should be able to bottle them up. We're all familiar with Virginia Tech's quarterback, Kyron Drones, who's, the team is awful. He's not having a great year because of that. He's had some success, though, on the ground. He's their second leading rusher, and he scored 9 rushing touchdowns this year. Their top rusher, Marcellus Hawkins, has been pretty good, 677 yards and a touchdown this year. But Miami only gives up 81.8 rushing yards per game. I think containing the quarterback is going to be the biggest challenge there, but Miami's been pretty good at that outside of, Thomas Castellano's fourth quarter. I think Miami's going to be up to that challenge. Again, I think really the only recipe for disaster here would be Miami committing unforced errors, turnovers. If we have one of those 4 interception games like we had against Louisville, if the ACC refs are feeling a little froggy out there and they decide to call Miami for every possible infraction and we rack up 12, 13 penalties, which Miami has done on a couple of occasions this year, it would have to be something like that for Miami to drop this game. So if the Hurricanes focus and they play the type of football they've been playing in recent weeks, you should be able to come out of Blacksburg with a comfortable victory. That's my message there. Let's go to some questions from the Locked On Canes insiders. Our guy, ND Hater 85. By the way, ND Hater, he's a Miami fan living right by South Bend, so he's in enemy territory all the time. He says, hey, Oklahoma, Utah, and BYU all lose the next 2 weeks and Miami wins out. Do you actually think Miami will get in over Notre Dame or Alabama? Not a chance, he says. The Miami hate and bias is real, and I hate to say it, but there's no way the committee puts them in. That's why Alabama is there as a buffer. Well, a couple of things. As far as Alabama, they're probably going to win out and finish with 2 losses, but you have to hope and pray that the Iron Bowl gets weird, as it sometimes does. I mean, there have been times when a really, really bad Auburn team will either beat a good Bama team or make it really close and interesting. Crazy things can happen in the Iron Bowl. So if Auburn can do us solid at the end of the season, would be much appreciated. As far as the Notre Dame thing goes, you're setting yourself up for a ton of controversy, right? Because the committee has made one thing clear. If Miami can get themselves in the same comparative pool of 3 teams with Notre Dame, if they're only separated by 1 or maybe 2 spots in the rankings, they can get in that same comparative pool. The committee has claimed that in that case, they would actually value the head-to-head and do the right thing, okay? So you would have to hope if Miami can finish this. And the good news is Miami has a chance for a quality win against Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks, right? And I know Notre Dame already beat Pittsburgh, but Notre Dame at number 9, they don't really have any remaining opportunities to move up because their final 2 games are against Syracuse, who right now is an embarrassment to the sport, and Stanford, who's terrible. So that doesn't really give Notre Dame an opportunity to move up by beating those teams, where Miami at least still has Pittsburgh to impress, hopefully win that game impressively. And if you do, if you can close that gap enough, if you can be a spot or two separated from Notre Dame, then the committee, I think, could be forced to actually value the head-to-head. So that would be the most hopeful scenario there, ND Hater. Jonathan from Pennsylvania is wondering if we win out and are still left out of the playoffs, if that will spark bigger discussions to either change the criteria used to get in the playoff or further expand the playoff. Something I appreciate, Jonathan, and I talked about this when I started the show. When you have prominent college football voices like Josh Pate, like Paul Finebaum, like national columnist, I think he's with Yahoo now, Dan Woken, a lot of prominent folks from 24/7 and On3 and ESPN that are actually speaking up for, hey, this not valuing the head-to-head thing. It's ridiculous. Like, this doesn't match up competitively with any other major sport. Every other major sport, if you have the same number of win and losses, a head-to-head should be the primary tiebreaker. So I believe we're already seeing it happen. Like, to your question, if Notre Dame at 10-2 gets in and Miami doesn't, despite the head-to-head, then I think you're going to have some very loud voices who are already kind of doing it, calling for reform and restructure of the way we do this playoff. So the answer to your question is absolutely yes. We'll answer more questions on the other side. Plus, I want to get to, for everybody wondering, we've touched on a couple of these, who we need to root against this weekend. We call it the hate guide, right? Who needs to lose to help Miami get in? You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. And thanks to the Everydayers for making the Locked On Network the #1 sports podcast network. I work really, really hard. My colleagues work really, really hard, but it's the awesome community we have with you guys, the listeners, the viewers, you guys helping us. And I wouldn't be doing this without you guys. Like, I love chatting with Miami fans and Miami haters every single day. And all of you guys have made us the #1 sports podcast network. So I can't say enough. I appreciate you guys so much for that. We get a question from Zach from Jacksonville, who says, if Miami's offense continues to flash the way it has the past 2 weeks with a noticeably different playbook and play calling, but we miss the playoffs as one of the first teams out, will fans' frustrations with Shannon Dawson change, or will they lay the blame mostly on him for the missed opportunity? I think it depends on who you talk to. I don't necessarily think the bulk of Miami fans would blame Shannon Dawson in that scenario. I think there's some folks who blame Dawson. There's a good amount of folks who blame Mario Cristobal because he's the captain of the ship. There's going to be some folks who blame, Carson Beck for not playing well in the Louisville game, for example. And there's also going to be some folks who just say, you know what? If the ACC officiating wasn't so terrible, we would have won that SMU game. Like, you're going to get it from all directions. I think bottom line, folks, and, we had it happen last year as well. If you're one of the first 1 or 2 teams out of the playoffs, we are going to, and I mean we like the collective we, not just Locked On Canes, but we're going to be replaying all of our regrets, right? Oh, man, imagine if we'd thrown one less interception against Louisville. Imagine if we had just hit one more play, if JoJo Trader hadn't bobbled that ball for an interception against SMU, what might have been, if we'd called a few more runs outside of the A gap earlier in the year, what might have been, there's people are going to be blaming everybody for this. So I don't necessarily think that the bulk of that is going to fall on Shannon Dawson, right? And also, listen, if Miami misses out, if you're going to blame people for that, if Miami goes 10-2 and misses out, there's also going to be people blaming the committee for not valuing that head-to-head either. So the blame is going to go around on that. Canes Comeback Tour says, hey, what do you think the offense is going to come out with this week? Will Girard Pringle start? Will Carson Beck throw for 3+ touchdowns? Yeah, I believe both of those things will happen. I think after last week, there's no reason why you wouldn't start Pringle again, even if Mark Fletcher is back. And Mark Fletcher's also working his way back from a multi-game injury. So even if Fletcher is 100%, they'll probably bring him on as the second or maybe even the third running back to, sort of ease him back into it. So I absolutely think Girard Pringle is going to start again. And then as far as Carson Beck goes, the way he and his receivers have been clicking and the way that, Virginia Tech plays not so good defense, I see no reason why Beck shouldn't throw for 3 touchdowns again in this game. We get a question from the kid who says, why are we recruiting young quarterbacks if we have been leaning to transfer portal quarterbacks the last few years? We are rumored now for Lenora Sellers, and then the guy writes, he stinks in parentheses, instead of focusing on playing nickel or Darion Coleman. Well, first of all, to be fair to Miami, the Lenora Sellers rumors, I don't think were coming from anybody inside the program. I can't blame Miami for that. If folks out there like Todd McShay, if they're speculating Lenora Sellers to Miami, that's not Miami's fault on that. But yeah, we have had Miami the last 2 years go out and get flashy, available transfer portal quarterbacks. Carson Beck this year, Cam Ward the year before that. So there's a pattern there. And a lot of folks, myself included, think that if a great quarterback comes available, Miami may not hesitate to give that quarterback a look. In terms of why you keep recruiting quarterbacks, you bring up 2 names, Luke Nickel and Darion Coleman, right? Luke Nickel right now is a true freshman. He theoretically has 4 years of eligibility after this year. Darion Coleman's not even on campus yet. If we believe, and I think Miami coaches believe this as well, that either or both of those young men have a high enough ceiling to be a starter and a high-level starter at the University of Miami, the other question is when, right? I think that if Miami has an opportunity to bring in another experienced quarterback to start for a year while both of those guys get ready, it's not as if Nickel and Coleman are sophomores and juniors right now. One of them's a true freshman, one of them's still playing high school ball right now. So I think the bigger question is, Emory Williams is heading into his 4th year, right? I mean, does Miami truly feel that Emory Williams is a better option than somebody like a Sam Levitt who might come available, right? That's the bigger question. Or Judd Anderson, who's heading into his 3rd year. Is he a better option than somebody like a Sam Levitt or whoever else might come available in that portal? So, again, I think Miami's not going to stop recruiting quarterbacks out of high school. And a couple of the really young guys might be the future at quarterback. Maybe the quarterback recruiting 2-3 years ago was not as good as it should have been, and we're paying the price for that. But then also, folks, when it comes to big-time college football teams winning with, transfer portal the team that won the national championship last year did that. The majority of the teams that played in the college football playoff last year had transfer quarterbacks, whether we like it or not. That's been a key to short-term success for a lot of teams out there. And Miami is a team that is really talented and is expected to achieve short-term success. This team should be, based on the way the roster is right now, you should be competing for a college football playoff spot as you are this year. So, which quarterback is going to give you the best chance to do that, I think becomes the question there. So that would be why. All right, let's see. We got questions about who to root for this weekend. So Stephen C. says, who do we root for in the USC versus Oregon game? Stephen, that to me, that's the toughest one to diagnose because you could say that, hey, if Oregon, who's number 7, may not fall far enough for Miami to pass them, maybe it's good for Oregon to beat USC because they weren't dropping below us anyway, whereas USC, who's number 15, could be a threat to Miami. If they win that game, they could leapfrog you. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is, I've heard people say this, but I don't necessarily believe it. Oregon doesn't really have any good wins. And this is their best win was against, Penn State, we thought they were good at the time, but they suck. So if Oregon loses to USC, they don't have any good wins. And there's a lot of folks who think Oregon could actually drop out of the field if they don't beat USC at home this weekend. I don't necessarily believe that. The idea of Oregon falling from number 7, outside the top 12 and falling behind Miami, I would have to see it to believe it. So I don't know. I guess I would probably lean to rooting for USC, but then you're scared that they might pass you. Let's take a look at these the games this weekend. The hate guide for Week 13. Obviously, we root for 13th ranked Miami at Virginia Tech. Miami has to win out in order to be in the playoff discussion. You mentioned 15th ranked USC against 7th ranked Oregon. You pick your poison with that one. Now, obviously, 3:30 p.m. in Austin. Texas is probably out of it with 3 losses, but SEC, never say never. You root for 2-8 Arkansas. And the funny thing about Arkansas is, like, they're 2-8. I've watched a lot. Like, for some reason, my son likes watching Arkansas. He watches every college football game. Like, Arkansas has been really competitive in most of their losses. So I'm not going to completely rule that out. Texas is favored by 8.5 at home. You'd root for Arkansas to beat them just in case. Let's see. Other games that could affect us. Oh, here's a big one. 11th ranked BYU plays at 7-3 Cincinnati. Cincinnati no longer ranked. You root for the Bearcats. BYU is favored by 2.5 on the road. You root for Cincinnati to beat them. If BYU loses to the Bearcats, they for sure fall behind Miami. You root for them. Let's see. Oh, here's one. 8th ranked Oklahoma hosting 22nd ranked Mizzou. Mizzou's an okay team. Oklahoma, they moved up big after beating Alabama, but if Oklahoma were to suffer their 3rd loss, they likely fall behind Miami. So you root for the Missouri Tigers big time in that game. Alabama this week hosts Eastern Illinois. So, don't waste your time even watching that game. The time to root against Alabama will be in the Iron Bowl the following week. Alabama's not losing to Eastern Illinois. Syracuse takes on number 9 Notre Dame. Notre Dame is favored by 35.5 points. Now, Syracuse is in even worse shape now than they were when Miami beat them a couple of weeks ago. So I find it hard to believe Cuse has any chance. But, Fran Brown has an opportunity to help us out. Now, if you tell Fran Brown, hey, win that game and you help Miami, what's Fran going to do? Fran's going to find like a backup walk-on tennis player to start at quarterback this way. He's done that with lacrosse players before. He's going to end up starting like a walk-on frat boy to start at quarterback this week just to make sure he doesn't help Miami. Let's see. Here's a big one. Huge one, folks. 16th ranked Georgia Tech is hosting Pittsburgh. Now, I know Georgia Tech is ranked behind Miami, but you still want Pittsburgh to win for 2 reasons. Pittsburgh beats Georgia Tech. Pittsburgh is probably ranked when Miami faces them next week. So that's better for Miami's strength of schedule. Also, in the outside chance that Miami could sneak into the ACC championship game, one of the things that has to happen is for Pittsburgh to win this week and then lose to Miami the following week. Let me give you that scenario on Miami's ACC championship game. So Miami, to get to the ACC title game, Miami needs to win out, obviously. In addition to winning out, Miami needs Georgia Tech must lose to Pittsburgh this week. That must happen. SMU must lose one of its final 2 games. They play against Louisville and against Cal. They have to lose one of those. Duke needs to lose one of its final 2 games against either North Carolina or Wake Forest. Virginia, the easiest path for Miami involves Virginia losing to Duke this week, which could happen, which would put them in an at-large 6-2 group that Miami can win a tiebreaker against. So that's what you're rooting for around the ACC this week, okay? But the most important one that's right in front of you is Pittsburgh must beat Georgia Tech. That helps Miami in numerous different ways. That's your hate guide for this week. Thanks, everyone, for making Locked On Canes your first listen. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports pod network. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.